Five Nights at Freddy's is an insanely popular video game franchise series of many books and of an increasingly hyped up movie coming out later this year. As a result of this popularity, of course, comes some criticism. One video that does such criticism is a Living Waters video narrated by Ray Comfort, discouraging Christians from watching this movie. It makes many claims and essentially labels the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise as demonic. I do need to preface this examination of Mr. Comfort's video with the fact that for the majority of it, there's simply little to actually criticize. He goes through his usual Comfort routine, and it's always beautiful to see him nudge often non-believers towards Christ. He's so polite, and he's certainly a lot braver and bolder than I am when it comes to proclaiming the gospel, an act which I merely do from the comfort of my own home and through this channel. So if you are watching this, sir, let me make this very clear that this is not a personal attack against you or your ministry, Mr. Comfort. This is simply a criticism on your handling of Five Nights at Freddy's. So let's first establish what Five Nights at Freddy's is, what the lore behind the games are, and if you'd like to skip ahead to the reaction to Mr. Comfort's video, the timestamp is right here. The first Five Nights at Freddy's game puts you in the role of a security night guard who has to survive 5 nights at the local Freddy Fazbear's pizzeria. Other than it being a horror game with plenty of jump scares galore, at its core, it's a resource management strategy game. Close the doors to your left and right if there is an animatronic outside, and make sure you don't have them closed too long because they use up electricity. Do trust me that you ought not to use up all your electricity, or else you'll let the main animatronic, which of course is Freddy, jump scare you after a few seconds of his eyes lighting up in the doorway. Oh yes, and let's talk about the animatronics for a bit. A couple of years ago, at this restaurant, there is a missing children's incident in which 5 children were reportedly lured in by a Fazbear employee. The bodies of these 5 children were never found, but you can deduce that they've been stuffed into these animatronic suits, and their spirits now haunt these animatronics. We learn in later games that this purple character is the guy who committed these murders. He gets a name, I think, from the books, or it might be in the 5th game, Sister Location, which of course is William Afton. Now, all of that stuff about Afton and the missing children's incident aren't explicitly given by the games as you play through them. You have to find it yourself by combing through the games for hints. This is the way that Scott Cawthon, the game's creator, tells stories. He has put bits and pieces of the story throughout the games for then you, the player, or the greater Five Nights at Freddy's community to solve and piece together. Now, Mr. Comfort makes 3 claims in his video about Five Nights at Freddy's. The first is that FNAF is the fruit of seductive spirits. The second is if you watch this movie, you are opening yourself up to demons. The third is that Scott Cawthon has departed from the faith and is devoting himself to deceitful spirits and teachings of demons. I do think that last claim is the most egregious of the 3, but let's first address the latter. I should think that most FNAF fans have somewhat of an idea on how Mr. Cawthon made the first game. He had been making games and movies with explicit Christian messaging, with all of them being financial failures. He was about to give up game developing altogether when he read a negative review on his latest game, Chipper & Sons Lumber Co. The review stated that the character models in this game were creepy like animatronics. It was at this point that Mr. Cawthon decided to make Five Nights at Freddy's. He thought to himself, I can make something way scarier than this, and it sure was, considering that his own character he created, Bonnie, actually gave him nightmares. Not only that, but Cawthon does credit the creation of the game to God in this Geeks Under Grace interview. Now evaluating that first claim that Mr. Comfort makes. Is Five Nights at Freddy's the fruit of seductive spirits? Considering that whole background and quite miraculous success of that first FNAF game, I cannot, in good conscience, label this game as the fruit of seductive spirits. It was only when Cawthon stopped worrying about putting an agenda into his games and simply decided to make a good video game that his career as a video game developer became successful. Especially considering the circumstances of the rapid increase in popularity of the game, it being picked up by YouTubers, the YouTube and Steam algorithm that resulted in this game becoming incredibly popular. I should think there's more to support the notion that God supernaturally helped this game and its subsequent franchise become the success story that it is today. Now, here's some context on the graphic content of the games and the movie themselves. That is to say, there is limited graphic content in either the games or the movies. There are obviously the jump scares, which aren't necessarily graphic, neither are the decrepit animatronics that roam around the FNAF 2 pizzeria, but any depiction of death and murder are censored and pixelated. Even the death of William Afton himself is pixelated. Now, looking at the movie, I know there's that big mask with swords in it, ready to moiter, but you ought to be aware that the movie is rated PG. While there will be violence, there won't be very graphic violence, and neither will there be any gore like a stock standard R18+ horror movie. So in assessing the claim that if you watch this movie, you are opening yourself up to demons, it isn't because of any graphic violence or gore in the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise, but merely the inclusion of supernatural creatures in this film is enough to open yourself up to demons, according to Mr. Comfort. Now, I should think it's fair to say that people who are watching this movie are certainly under the impression that this is fictional. I am certain that there will be no one who watches this movie, thinks to themselves, I can do that, and decides to moiter kids or talk to dead spirits themselves. Now, I still think this is a matter of conscience, so if your conscience says that you shouldn't watch or play Five Nights at Freddy's, by all means, I'm not stopping you. But saying watching a movie that includes supernatural themes is the equivalent of opening yourself up to demons, I think is too broad a brush to paint. If you're a regular viewer of my channel, you might even be hearing echoes of the anime is satanic crowd in the same sentiment towards Five Nights at Freddy's. Now, the most egregious claim made against Scott Cawthon is that he has walked away from the faith. In numerous interviews and posts he has publicly made over the course of developing the Five Nights at Freddy's game series, he has been very open and public in his Christian faith. We can see that here in his interview with Geeks Under Grace, where he's clear that God is the reason why he makes video games in the first place. I'll link that in the description for you to read. And also in his cancellation arc 2 years ago, he has openly donated to Republican candidates and openly proclaimed his faith, his political standings, and his pro-life convictions. The reason I support Scott Cawthon is because he is one of the modern Christian content creators who have led the way to inspire even me to create this YouTube channel. And the reason why I enjoy Five Nights at Freddy's is that it is by far one of the most successful video game, book, and now perhaps movie franchises that have been made by a Christian. It is with all of this that I find it unfortunate that Mr. Comfort considers Cawthon as one who has departed from the faith. As I said at the start of the video, this is by no means an attack on Ray Comfort. I have a great deal of respect for him and the ministry that he has built. Though the reason why I've made this video is that I hear those same echoes of anime is satanic, video games are satanic, rock is satanic. And when we call things that are not explicitly sinful nor directly related to Satan, and we give these things qualifiers which are simply inaccurate, it is in this that we are giving ground to the enemy that he just doesn't actually have. I've made myself clear that I am on the side of Christian liberty when it comes to the media that we consume. But I hope that in these discussions we remain respectful, truthful, and most importantly, in line with God. Though, if you are interested in more of the content that I create, I've done reviews on what I call Christian anime that is uplifting and inspiring to watch, such as the romance anime Horimiya.